entrepreneurs, and especially professionals who sort of worked and then come into entrepreneurship, we come with something which I really call as the Messiah syndrome. We come in with this thought saying, I know all, and I'm here to solve it, and then the farmers will sort of learn from me, and I have all the answers. So that was like shattered in the first 6 months when you went and interacted with customers, saying that you really don't know anything, boss. You only come with a certain hypothesis. Maybe that hypothesis is based on certain facts and your understanding, but that understanding is very, very limited as compared to what the reality of the market is.
Welcome to episode 142 of Founders Unfiltered. I'm Aviral here with Mazin. We've been running this podcast for over 5 years now, and the goal's always been simple: unscripted, honest conversations with Indian founders about what it really takes to build a company. Today's guest is Prasanna Rao, the co-founder and CEO of Arya.ag, one of India's largest agritech platforms, building end-to-end solutions for farmers, FPOs, and enterprises. From post-harvest storage and finance to market linkages, Arya has scaled across 20,000 plus warehouses and touched millions of farmers. In this episode, we'll unpack Prasanna's journey from banking and finance to reimagining India's agricultural supply chain and explore what it takes to build trust, technology, and scale in probably one of the toughest industries in India to disrupt. Prasanna, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Aviral. Thanks, Mazin, for having me with you guys today.
Cool. Before we dive into the heavyweight stuff, we wanted to start with a rapid fire round to get things moving. Quick answers, maximum honesty is what we'd request. So Prasanna, who's a founder you'd blindly back?
Somebody who believes in responsible profit.
Okay.
Concise. One mental model, film, or book that shaped how you think.
I think there was a quote by Dr. Verghese Kurian, which I was really influenced by, which said, India's place in the sun would come from the partnership between the skills of its professionals and the wisdom of its farmers. So I think that's really sort of has driven me and keeps me going.
Nice. One myth about Indian agriculture you wish more people knew.
That in agriculture, you can't make money and create a profitable company without taking shortcuts.
A ritual or habit that keeps you motivated.
I think talking to different stakeholders, investors, customers, and the team.
Nice. If Arya didn't exist, what would you be building?
Probably something to do with teaching, I guess.
Nice. Super. Prasanna, for our listeners who may not know what Arya does, how would you describe what you're building and whom you're building it for?
We took some time to arrive at this, but what Arya really does is to solve two very basic problems in Indian agriculture. The first being that farmers and other smaller entities near the farmgate involved in Indian agriculture do not have the choice to really decide when they want to sell their produce after harvesting. Which basically means that immediately after harvest, they tend to sell their produce at distress prices, because that is the time the prices are the lowest, knowing fully well that if they could wait for a few months, they could earn at least another 15 to 40% more than what they actually did. And the second question that we solve for is the freedom of choice for these smaller entities to be able to decide whom they want to sell their produce to. Invariably after harvest, where they're selling, even at those distress prices, they end up selling to some local intermediary, maybe some money lender who would have given them some money prior to harvest and would have had some kind of an informal contract saying, once you harvest, you have to sell your produce to me. By opening that choice for them, you again enable an additional maybe 15-20% income for the farmers in a very short period of time. So I think for us, whatever we've done in the past, whatever we're doing today, and what we intend to do in the future is all linked to these two questions on freedom for farmers to be able to decide when they want to sell their produce and whom they want to sell it to.
Very interesting. It's a And it's, I think, one of the nicest and simplest ways in which a founder has described their company. So your teaching is a path that you can still do. I think it was very clear and very nice. And you've not been in agritech for your life. You've had an 8-year experience in banking. Did you always plan to start something, or did it happen more organically? Another question that we had asked another entrepreneur, and they had said that they always wanted to be an entrepreneur. They just didn't have the means to be an entrepreneur. So they were like building a bank balance to be able to do it. Was that the reason for you, or, how did it emerge?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we come from backgrounds where parents, grandparents, their parents, all sort of working in different kind of government organizations. I come from a background of railway, so I've been a railway kid. All you knew was, there's a job that you have to take and then sort of retire at some point and then have whatever life that you had to. I think, for me, entrepreneurship came in when you saw an opportunity that organizations that were your dream organizations could not probably fulfill it. And which is where some of those dreams that you had led you to create your own. I think that's how it sort of started or happened for me. So, as you mentioned, I was at ICICI. I was at I would say a decent position. ICICI was a great organization to be in. Gave a lot of responsibility to us as employees. And that's when you realize that even with all that freedom, it was difficult to move a large organization such as a large bank to cater to a need which was so natural, so inherent, but had specific structural challenges. And which is where you thought that probably you're better off doing it yourself. And that's how me and my co-founders sort of jumped in to do that.
Did you feel this frustration at ICICI, like not being able to service this group of customers, which is very potent but underserved?
Absolutely. I think, in one of the presentations that we were giving to the senior management at ICICI, we shared a data which said that only about 1/3 of India's total production reaches larger markets that are serviced by banks. Which meant that there was a 2/3 of the production, which is the 2/3 of the total potential, which was, somewhere getting transacted in markets where banks were not operating. And which is why, the whole idea was that, okay, can we do that as a bank? And then you figured that in spite of all the freedom you had, there were certain structural challenges that sort of existed in formal organizations, larger organizations, which didn't allow it to move as nimble-footedly as was needed. And which is where you thought that, okay, probably you could do it yourself. Yes, it meant some risks and whatever, but I'm glad we took that.
And did you think that agritech was very hard, or just agriculture was very hard? Was that the notion that was there, or you were like, hey, it seems like a real problem, somebody should solve it?
No, agriculture has been difficult, but at the same time, I come from my background has been rural management. I studied rural at Anand in Irma, and then joined Amul for a few years. And once you worked enough, and then I also worked for Coca-Cola after that for some time before I joined ICICI. So you saw these two worlds. You saw Amul and where. There were, say, for example, just to give you a small example, at Amul, when I was in Bombay, I was basically heading the dairy business as part of the team at Amul in the sales side. And you would go and speak to a retailer trying to sell Amul butter. The budget that I held was so meager that, you could not do anything at that outlet, but the outlet still gave you respect. Maybe because the brand was so strong, maybe because, you had a product like Amul butter, which was so strong. But Coca-Cola wasn't also a weak brand. I mean, it was a global brand. So when I moved to Coke, the same retailer would now have a different tone talking to. So there was a power that farmers and working with farmers brought to you as an organization. So I thought, and that was, I think, the core strength, and which is when I said, I'm really influenced by that statement of Dr. Kurian. You believe that as professionals, when you can sort of overlay that with what farmers are doing in India, you can actually wield a lot of influence. And I think that is where the whole kind of motivation or the propulsion really came from.
And Amul seems to be built on those core principles, the wisdom of farmers and the skill of professionals.
Absolutely.
Very nice. And what wedge did you see, or what gap did you see in the market that made you believe what you're building is different? And, what did you start building with then?
So I think the largest gap was this, that, at ICICI, we created this business where I was heading the commodity finance business for ICICI. And it scaled up to a large business. It also got replicated across banks. ICICI was among the first banks to start that, and then got replicated across multiple private sector banks, some public sector banks, etc. But as I was mentioning to you, the core gap was that you were still sort of touching a very small part of the market. You were only working with the larger players. So when we were doing this business, the average ticket size of a loan that ICICI would give would be in the range of about 2 to 2.5 crores. Now, if you were to translate that to what an individual farmer produces, probably to get to that level, you need 100 to 150 farmers to get to that level. So, or maybe more actually. So the whole idea was that, that was the gap that you saw. So as I was saying, one data point which said only 1/3 moved to those markets where banks were operating. Second, you were only catering to a certain set of customers who by numbers were very, very small. And hence you figured that there is this large gap closer to the farm gate, which could actually be solved if you could build a model which is built around farmers and could really solve for something very basic at the same time was which clearly appeared to be a viable business model.
And what were the tough challenges in the early days? Was it convincing farmers or building trust or getting customers on board, all of them together? What do you think was the challenge?
The greatest challenge was to convince your own team. So,
Okay.
so once you have all of that, then you could look at things outside. So
yeah, no, I love that. I agree as well. I think the order is team, customers, investors, and a lot of founders do it in reverse and they don't succeed.
Yeah,
for us, right.
It started with the team to say, boss. So they would come up and say, boss, kya bol rahe ho aap? How is this possible? We don't have any precedents. Whoever has ever tried this has only failed. So to build that belief to say, what, this is possible. And, you could do it. So there's a hypothesis, and from that hypothesis to practice was a journey which first we had to really travel. And then once you made that is when you went out and tried your thoughts. The other thing was this, what I really call as entrepreneurs, and especially professionals who sort of worked and then come into entrepreneurship. We come with something which I really call as the Messiah syndrome. We come in with this thought saying, I know all and I'm here to solve it. And then, the farmers will sort of learn from me. And, I have all the answers. So that was like shattered in the first 6 months when you went and interacted with customers saying that, you really don't know anything, boss. You only come with a certain hypothesis. Maybe that hypothesis is based on certain facts and your understanding, but that understanding is very, very limited as compared to what the reality of the market is. So the second was to unlearn a lot of things which you sort of came up with. And then you said, okay, well, this is the market. This is the reality in which you have to now embed yourself. And only then you would really sort of be able to do something around. So I think those were the first very basic kind of challenges that we had to really overcome. And then came, speaking to your customers, trying to tell them, there is a new way to do things or a slightly different way to do things. And which is where when you step down from that pedestal of being that messiah to say, you are a partner to that farmer, is when the guy started listening to you. Otherwise, earlier they would think, somebody's come in from some urban area, the fellow talks my language, but, hardly knows my reality. And he's just giving me some gyan around his theory. So which is where I think, that stepping down was a great learning, and also was the biggest challenge, I would say, in terms of our journey. And then sort of, the rest sort of followed. Yes, you had to build a model, you had to test it, you had to get that product market fit as you sort of went through that journey. And then investors, then lenders, other partners, all of that sort of started. But I think beginning was around some of the very, very basic stuff around your own unlearning, and then to make sure that how do you onboard your own kind of a team which believes in this and says, okay, you know what, we are with you as you go through this.
And how did you convince investors to back a company in its early years? Space is usually risky. It's hard to raise capital.
Yeah, no, I think we've been very lucky in the sense that, one is that we went with something that was working. So we started bootstrapped. We put in, fortunately for us, when we quit, we had at least some pool of savings. So we could survive on our own without really being dependent from the first day on external capital. So what we went to investors with was something that you had actually proven. Okay, it may have been early days, but you had proven a certain model. You were already sort of, clearly showing profitability in your whole model. So, which is where we found like-minded investors who understood that this is possible. People who could really see what technology could do in a sector which otherwise has not been ever exposed to real-time tech. So that, with the understanding of finance and probably the experience that each one of us had as co-founders and the team, really gave investors the confidence that kuch to karenge, matlab these guys will not sort of blow away the money, and which is how it sort of came in. And a lot in terms of, I also really believe that when you have a model which sort of is embedded in the reality of your customer, it shows. So early days, okay, you may be working with 10 FPOs, and those 10 FPOs, when the investors came and met, they could really see what had happened in their lives in the last, say, whatever couple of years that we were into. And that's how I think it sort of slowly came up. And then one person believed in you, then you took that pool of resources, built it further, then another guy believed in you. And that's how you sort of, slowly stacked that up.
And talking about the model, you guys do quite a lot. You do warehousing, financing, and market linkage all under one roof. How do you decide what to focus on? And was this, did you do everything at once, or was it one thing and then you kind of worked into other areas?
I think, you started with one. I mean, the whole idea was that when we were really thinking, what is it that we are trying to solve here? I think, the moment you define what is the problem that you're solving, I think a lot of these questions slowly fall into place automatically. So the moment we first started saying, let us, solve for this question on enabling choice for when to sell their produce. So the moment you thought about that, you figured that, when to sell, meaning immediately after harvest, the farmer should not sell. Rather, they're better off selling a few months later when the prices are up. Now, if you have to do that, then, warehousing comes automatically saying, "Rakhne to do, tab to bechega." And the moment you say, okay, he stores, then automatically the second thing comes up that if Mazin is a small farmer, and I tell him not to sell his produce immediately after harvest, how will he live? He needs the money, which is why he's selling that produce at whatever price that is available to him. And hence, embedding finance became imperative. So you started with storage. You learned that, just by offering storage, it is not going to solve the problem. So you had to embed finance, and which is how you got finance. So the moment you did both of these, then you figured, you are asking Mazin to store, you're giving him a loan, very good, he's taking the money, but he has to repay the money to you before he sells that particular produce. Now, how will that happen? And second, he will repay only if he sells. So hence, the market linkage part was clearly the next step to say, till the time I don't solve for that, these two are only sort of temporary solutions that you brought in. So which is how I think, the learning along the way to say, okay, you come with a certain thought, and then the market teaches you a few other things. You sort of build that up, and then slowly the solution becomes more comprehensive, and which is how I think it sort of all stacked together to say, okay, the moment you define that as the problem and define what is the core issue that you are really addressing, then all of this sort of slowly comes together. Is what has been our experience.
That's incredible. And from a customer acquisition strategy, did you kind of get one customer and then try to solve all of this for them, or did you do the warehousing piece, try to scale? Can you walk us through how you thought about acquiring customers?
Yeah, so, again, the whole Messiah syndrome to say, I'm going to solve this for farmers. And hence you went directly to farmers, figuring out that, these are so small farmers that you could not really initially
build. Can't do each one, right?
Yeah. How could you reach to millions of farmers in one shot? So if you started doing this, saying, okay, I'll go to one farmer, convince one, start with them, go to next, you need a certain basic minimum kind of a threshold volume. If you want to say operate a warehouse, the break even happens at about, say, 80%. Now, 80% occupancy can't happen through one farmer or two farmers. So, which is when you learned that, okay, I can't go in to individual farmers. I have to go in through groups of farmers. And fortunately for us, there was this huge kind of a push around, say, the whole push around farmer producer organizations, or FPOs, which was being supported by the government at that time. And, there was this entire kind of a focus around building farmer organizations. So which is what we sort of tagged on to, saying, okay, instead of looking at individual farmers, can we get to farmer producer organizations? So you get in one shot about 500 to 1,000 farmers, and then go down. And then there again, you figured, now do I have to go to one farmer organization at a time, or is there also an aggregation of farmer organizations? So we figured, there is this concept of a promoting agency, which promotes multiple farmer organizations. So you said, okay, let me go to the promoting agency, and from there, get from one interaction, say 10 or 15 or 20 farmer organizations. And one shot you get 20, and then from 20, each farmer organization has, say, 500 members. And that immediately sort of takes you to 1,000 members. So which is how I think, you went about saying, first we go with the farmer organizations, from the farmer organizations go downwards, which really helped us in a way, manage our costs and our model optimally.
No, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. But can you help explain what was the format in which you kind of went to them, right? Was it how did you actually reach these end farmers through these organizations? Can you help walk us through it?
So we would go to these promoting agencies. For example, Tata Trusts was one. You had, Pradhan. You had, there's another one called Shrijan. So there were many of these organizations, and each one of them were struggling on the post-harvest side. So there was Green Revolution really brought in a lot of impetus on the pre-harvest side, how to increase yields, some impact of different inputs and all of that, which helped increase yields. But at that time, when we were sort of thinking of this and starting out in around 2012-13, there was very little focus on the market side of things. Once the producers harvest, then what happens? So each of these organizations are also struggling on that. And that is the solution we brought in. So there was an immediate kind of a connect that you could establish, saying that, okay, this is your problem, and this is exactly what we are trying to solve for. And there are not too many people who are really talking about it. So it was like an immediate kind of a connection that happened. So you said, okay, what we are really here to solve for is to make sure that your farmer organization can offer the right relevance to its members. So we did not go out and say, okay, you give me your list of farmers and then I will work with them. I said, I will work with you to make sure that your farmers are coming on board, and then their incomes are going up. Because the moment the farmers or the members' incomes go up, the salience that they have towards their organization also goes up. So which is where it has to be a win-win situation. I can't sort of go out and say that, I am doing something and it is going to be at the cost of somebody else. Then it is never a sustainable and a scalable solution. So which is how I think, what we went and told them is, when we started out, it was the first question around when to sell. So we would say, okay, we will activate a warehouse close to where you are. Let us encourage your farmers to aggregate and store the produce. Once they store, it's our promise that within 5 minutes they'll get a loan, and they can actually decide to hold on to their produce till the time the prices are up. And the first few kind of pilots that we did, more demonstrations that we did, they were hugely successful, and which is where, in India, like any other country, if you can demonstrate that your customer earns because of you, then it just automatically scales up. So, one
word of mouth and people talking about.
So one FPO talking to the other, one promoting agency talking to the other, and that's how it sort of scales up. And then, a lot of other partners come in. Then you had the buyer side also. So we were working with the Louis Dreyfus, ITC, a lot of other large corporates also. So which is how the two sides really came in. On the supply side, you had the FPOs and their members who are the farmers. And on the demand side, you had these large kind of companies that sort of started coming onto the platform, and which is how the whole thing sort of stacked together as you went along.
That's incredible. And in hindsight, if you could go back to your early days and do something differently, one decision perhaps that you would have approached differently, what would that be?
Probably just to say that I didn't know much. I think that was, that humbling experience that happened maybe about 8 months or 9 months into the journey. If that realization we had right from the first day, probably we could have done things and saved on some more costs and sort of built a model which probably we could have achieved a lot of these things earlier.
A good one. And talking about the market, how has the market evolved since you started? I'm sure there are a lot more players now and a lot of kind of traditional companies getting into the space as well.
The good thing is that, more than anything else, COVID sort of brought in this whole thing around the fact that, there is agribusiness is important. And, it sort of propelled a lot of things, the use of technology, the fact that, you could actually use a platform to go ahead and avail of services. So a lot of that happened, and which is where I think as an industry, if you see, it has really sort of grown since COVID. Agri-tech as a term never really existed. I mean, when we started, we never really thought you're doing something which would be called as an agri-tech at some point in time. You basically saw that, okay, there is this problem, and then, these are some thoughts we have. Let us try and build something which will solve these problems. And then you figured, okay, these problems are best solved if you integrate technology. And that is how it sort of came together. I'm glad that a lot of those initial kind of, thoughts and beliefs are today translated into models. Who would have ever thought that in India you would have a drone spraying inputs on the fields? And that's a reality today. Who would have thought that today more than 99% of our loans would be disbursed digitally? We probably 10 years ago, somebody told us, we ourselves would have scoffed at it. So it has evolved where I think some of these core problems are finding solutions through technology and through very simple, transparent models. So that's the way it is going, and I'm really hopeful that this trend would continue and would result in something meaningful.
It's incredible. Certainly sounds like we're moving in the right direction. But what about you and how you have changed over the years? Has your leadership style evolved?
Yes, I think it's been a really humbling experience. You started out thinking you know all, to saying, you probably know nothing. And which is where I think, the whole idea of saying that, your journey is truly defined by how much you listen to the different stakeholders and sort of gather that. And that comes in from your interactions with not only your customers, your team, your investors, your lenders, your ground level partners, the warehouse owners, and which is how I think as a leader, I think you become much more receptive as an individual to what the market is trying to tell you. It sometimes is quite sort of humbling. It really puts you down. You think, what, I know this is a model which will work, and then you take it to the market and then it fails. It completely bangs. So which is where, you realize that, okay, there is something more to this, and that will come in only if you are sort of, listening to what your stakeholders are telling you.
You became a better listener for one. But what about the other relationship with you've spoken about the importance of employees, but as a leader, how have you changed, and how do you think about finding the right talent? What are some of the skills that you look for in good employees?
So I think, one is retention comes in not, or I would say attracting employees is not so much about what package you offer, what kind of money that they get or remuneration. That may be obviously one of the key kind of factors. But what we've seen is that, most of our early team and also the leadership team after that, many of them came in at salaries lower than what they were actually getting at that time. So there is something that the business can do. And hence, it's important to keep that front and center. Saying that, I don't know whether we'll succeed or fail. I mean, that's something time will tell. But at least what we're trying to do is meaningful, is one aspect. And I think that's something which has been very, very useful for all of us. And in terms of, when we look at people, and especially as you're moving forward, what this sector offers is an unprecedented challenge. So people who are like, looking to create and sort of give back something out of their own talent pool is so critical. And hence, when you go out and say, how do you make sure that, that small farmer who doesn't have a smartphone still uses your platform? How will you solve for it? And that's when, that's what excites people.
Solving meaningful problems.
Yeah. So I think that's been, and also at the same time, it just can't, see, we are not a philanthropy. We are not a charity organization. So you have to have a balance to say, while you're solving for those problems, you're still profitable. You're still an organization where Ps believe in you, where you can really think of, probably if you define for yourself that you will go out and list in the next few years, then it is a saleable proposition. I can't just be theorizing about it. The model has to believe and has to, in a way, exhibit.
Just a mission is not enough.
Exactly.
That makes
so I think,
to kind of come it together.
To say that there is a mission, there is a strategy, and there is execution. And that execution is also meaningful, which is feeding into building that strategy kind of further. Together. I think the moment, and it's not only about us, it's about any successful organization. If these two sort of don't work together, it's very difficult to attract people.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for sharing. And I want to ask you a bit more about competition. Maybe first of all, tell me, who would you say are your biggest competitors, and what, or is that something you don't think about at all? How do you think about the competitive landscape?
No, competitors do exist. I mean, for us, one of the things which has happened is that you don't have one single player that does all of this. So, one single player that, that sort of brings in pre-harvest data expertise, same player also offering, say, aggregation and storage, same player offering finance, and same player offering market linkages or commerce solutions. So we have competition in different buckets. So which is why you're sort of always on your toes saying, yahan pe idhar ye ho raha hai, so you have to now work on this, and there is somebody else who's doing something there. So it's both an advantage and a disadvantage, but at the same time, the way we look at it is that, we're still a very small player. I mean, if you look at, we are the largest, but even with that largest, you only catering to 3% of India's total production. So if you see what we do is about 30,000 crores worth of commodities that come onto the platform every year. Now that is about 3% of India's total production. So you still 3%. And we alone can't be doing all this. I mean, if I were to say that I will have 80% market share of this, I mean, that's not practical. So you will have, you will need other players coming in and working towards this. So the way we see this is, yes, the competition always keeps us on our toes, but at the same time, that the market is so large that no single player can really, solve for this. So there will be players, there'll be others that will come in, that are coming in. And I think together is how this problem will be solved.
And with that, would love to understand your vision for the future. What do you think the next 5 to 10 years looks like? What are some of the big bets that you're making?
The way we've sort of gotten to understand our business is that while solving for those two problems, you're basically solving for the trust gap in Indian agriculture. So, when I say that, you help store the produce and hence you come in, we don't own any of these warehouses. All of these warehouses exist. We've sort of created like a platform of an Airbnb of agriculture warehouses is what we've created. So, it is not that if Arya wasn't there, the warehouses didn't exist. They still existed. But the challenge was that the farmer or the FPO did not trust that the warehouse owner would actually be able to store his or her produce in a scientific manner. That once he leaves, say, 100 bags of wheat with a warehouse, he will get those 100 bags back. Because for him, these 100 bags are like gold, right? I mean, like we think of our assets, they think of that. So, which is where, so what was really missing was a trust layer saying that, okay, well, don't worry, the warehouse exists. We are here and we will make sure that these 100 bags, when you put in, after a few months, when you come back, you will get your 100 bags, come what may. Similarly, a bank was to lend to the farmers, which they did. But the problem was that the banks did not believe that these smaller farmers would be able to repay their loans. So you needed somebody to come in between and say, don't worry. We will take your money and we will make sure that your money will be back. Similarly, when you're selling, a buyer sitting, some large miller somewhere, how does that large miller trust a small FPO that they will deliver the right quality and quantity? And similarly, how will that FPO trust that this miller is going to give them or make the payment as promised? So if you look at Indian agriculture, it is basically these sets of bilateral transactions which are constrained because of the lack of trust. And what we see as ourselves is that role that we play as the bridge for that trust gap. So
for all the different participants that are so different and have different.
So which is why we don't say, okay, we are just into warehousing, or I'm just into finance, or I'm just into commerce. Tomorrow we're thinking of getting into logistics, for example. I will not operate any trucks, but there is some logistics operator who comes onto the platform and then offers this as a service. Similarly, processing. Today we are helping sell that raw material of the FPO to a miller. Now, can I process that raw material of the FPO and then sell that processed material to a wholesaler? Now, which is what you come in to say that, okay, you are coming in as this layer of trust. And the way we sort of define this is that we look at ourselves as the grain operating system of this country. I love that. In tech, in a computer, for example, there is an OS, and that OS helps different applications work seamlessly. And which is how we look at ourselves, saying that we are this operating system in Indian agriculture, which makes sure that different applications, whether it is a lender to a borrower, a warehouse owner to a depositor, to a buyer, to a seller, a transporter to a entity that is transporting produce, a processor to a raw material producer, the government to a farmer, an export market to a supplier. All of these are just different applications that are sort of happening around us. Now, as the grain operating system, you're sort of just trying to make sure that these applications happen seamlessly with full trust and transparency.
No, that makes a lot of sense and helps to put in perspective. And so it's really the evolution for the next few years is whatever new kind of things plug in, whether it's logistics or whatever. And you decide based on talking to people or demand. How do you kind of decide which areas to pick?
So the way we look at this is that what is most congruent to what you're currently doing. So it's just an extension. So I will not go and do something which is so different that it needs to be further integrated into it is an extension. For example, today, when I store, finance is inherent. When I store and offer finance, sale is inherent. When I sell, transportation is inherent.
You just keep following it and seeing what it takes.
Add one layer on top of the other so that you don't, which is why we don't make too many investments. I don't need too much money to come out and say that when we started our commerce solution, it was not like, I need like $100 million to start it. I needed nothing. I had the produce. I needed to now connect to buyers, which were anyways coming and storing with me.
And it goes back to that analogy, right? When you have the operating system working, you can just plug more things into it and it scales because you have the trust layer built in. Amazing. And Prasanna, the reason why we call this podcast Founders Unfiltered, we ask this question to all our guests. What's one piece of unfiltered feedback that you received that really impacted you personally or professionally?
The ability to not be bogged down by failures in one shot. I mean, little cliched, but as an entrepreneur, I think that's been the core learning.
And I'll ask, was there a particular failure that comes to mind?
Many, many. I've been, as I said, when you started out, we had a very utopian idea when we started out. We go to create a model which will have no risk. Theoretically, it's all possible, huh? But the point is that, when you sort of went into practice, you said it just bombed on your face and you figured, theory, this was just theory. And which is where to regroup again saying it was very highly demotivating. You were like so charged up. You left your jobs thinking this model is going to work. And then the first few months you realize it is not working. And it is no way in hell it is going to work. So, which is where to come out, regroup and say, fine, let's look at what the market's telling us.
Keep going and don't get bogged down by failures. Great advice for all our listeners. Thank you so much, Prasanna, for joining us. Really enjoyed having you in the
My pleasure. Thanks so much. Wonderful talking to you.